Once upon a time, on the island of Oki, located 68 miles northwest of Japan's mainland, there once existed a remote fishing village. And in this village lived a fisherman whose talent in making toys was known throughout the land. After a long evening of fishing, the man was gutting and cleaning his catch when he found something rather peculiar. From the stomach of the large catfish, he pulled a shiny tin spoon. From the tin of the spoon, the man decided he would make 25 tin samurai. In his workshop, he melted the spoon in his forge and began casting the little soldiers. His skilled hands meticulously crafted the small figures. Each had a top knot, was dressed in a kimono, and wore 2 swords through his belt. After the man painted the samurai, they all looked exactly the same, except for the 25th tin samurai. The 25th tin samurai was different simply because he was the last to be made. There wasn't quite enough tin to finish him, so he was left with only 1 leg. Of all the toys the fisherman made, there was one that he loved most of all. It was his first creation, a slender ivory-skinned geisha. She wore an exquisite silk kimono, and her brilliant ruby lips reminded him of the cherry blossoms that bloomed once a year on the cliffs of Oki Island. The 25th samurai, in spite of his handicap, was just as brave, loyal, and honorable as any one of his companions. Alongside them, he fought many glorious battles against the dragon on the plains of the toy room floor. One day, while marching home after an epic campaign, the little samurai saw the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. She had ruby lips and daintily stood just outside her house. She was as beautiful and graceful as he was strong and loyal. She elegantly held 2 fans in her hands. He had never seen such a sight. How wonderful he thought it would be if she would consent to become his wife. But she was so refined that despite his great bravery, he did not dare speak to her. All he could do was stand and stare. When the fisherman noticed the tin samurai staring at the geisha, he grew very jealous. "Stop staring, or something bad will happen to you," he said. But nothing could deter the little samurai. He didn't even turn his head in response. The morning after the fisherman had issued his warning, the little samurai was standing on the windowsill gazing across the toy room at the geisha. When the fisherman entered and again found the samurai staring at the geisha, he flew into a rage and threw the windows open. He clenched the samurai tightly in his fist and hurled him out the window. The other 24 samurai watched in horror as their brother fell 2 stories to the swirling water below. A wave swelled forward and engulfed the samurai. He sank deeper and deeper until he had almost reached the bottom of the sea, where he would have been lost forever when he was swallowed by a large catfish. The inside of the catfish was pitch dark, but even though there was no one to see him, the little tin samurai stood firmly at attention and kept his thoughts on his beloved geisha. He was a credit to his clan. They would have been proud had they seen him now. He had almost given up hope of seeing her again when suddenly blinding light burst in above his head like an exploding firework. The fish had been caught and was being cleaned. When the little samurai's eyes adjusted to the light, he was surprised to find he was in the very house in which he had lived before his journey began. The fisherman was astonished when he removed the samurai from the catfish. It must be a sign from the gods, he thought, and took the samurai into the toy room, placing him next to the 24 others and sinking into deep thought. Everyone was anxious to see the little soldier who fell from the window and hear his tale, but he only had eyes for the ivory-skinned geisha who stood just outside the rice paper doors of her house. When the fisherman noticed the samurai's gaze, jealousy and anger clouded his thoughts, causing him to disregard the message from the gods. Full of envy, the man clasped the samurai and flung him into the fire. The gallant samurai stood tall as the heat of the flames began to scorch him, and in that moment, knew that the geisha would never become his wife. But just as the brave little tin samurai gave up hope, the window blew open, and a violent gust of wind threw the dainty geisha from her home and into the fire beside her. She disappeared into a burst of sparks, and the little soldier quickly melted away. The next morning, when the fisherman was cleaning out the hearth, beneath all the ashes, he found a dainty little cherry blossom and the tiny tin heart of the brave tin samurai.